Good morning, everybody. Congratulations. You've almost made it through another week. We got one more day left. Tomorrow morning for our coffee break, you're going to get to see Wayne Hoover again talking about coffee. Coffee is for closers. Hopefully you've enjoyed our coffee breaks this week. I'm going to go a little bit behind the scenes at WZ and show off all the talent we have on our support staff and some other people that you may not have had a chance to meet yet. So I'm excited about the coffee breaks coming next week. This morning, speaking of coffee, a shout out to our friends over at Starbucks, the mug I got when I was up in Seattle working with an incredible crew over there. Today, first start, so we're a little fancier today. Tony and I are looking forward to another virtual class kicking off in about 30 minutes after our coffee break. So I get to stare at myself in this wonderful webcam for the next 4 or 5 hours. So it should be a fun day. Today I want to talk about some of the books that I've really enjoyed over the last year and that are applicable to our interview interrogation industry. If you haven't checked it out, last week Chris Norris did a coffee break and talked about some podcast episodes. Earlier, Tony this week talked about some food and fitness apps. So just a lot of stuff out there to keep you occupied, keep your mind moving as we work through this together. So here's my quick list for you guys. This book here by Malcolm Gladwell, one author that I really enjoy reading, Talking to Strangers, is one of his most recent book that really just dives into overall communication strategies. Malcolm Gladwell's written books like Blink, Outliers, Tipping Point. And this book specifically dives into not just communication, but even mentions interviews and interrogations and trying to get the truth out of somebody. So relative to the industry and a pretty simple read. Speaking of interrogations, this is a great book I read about a year ago titled Unjustifiable Means. It was written by Mark Fallon, NCIS special agent, who Mark Fallon, amongst others, Colonel Steve Kleinman, were just courageous members of our military that have worked to eradicate some of the enhanced interrogation techniques or torture techniques that were being used. And this book really goes into what was being used and their pathway to try to eradicate those at some of the black sites across the world. So I thought this is a really neat book. There's a movie called The Torture Report or The Report that's also available that goes over the same story. From a more human resource investigation, trauma interviewing, sexual harassment, workplace violence type of theme, 2 books that come to mind. I know this one here, Know My Name by Chanel Miller. Tony was just talking about this on LinkedIn and just finished this book. This was written by a survivor of a sexual assault case. And she goes into her experience of dealing with trauma, having to go through the trial process, and really everything that comes with being a survivor of a case like this and the impact that trauma has, and really insightful to look at it from that perspective. And the other one that I think is relative to our world of interviews and investigations, and those of you that watched Netflix, the film Unbelievable, covers this case, which was highlighted in this book, A False Report, A True Story of Rape in America. I know they might be backwards on your screen, but this book here goes through the case of a serial rapist and from an investigative standpoint, highlights some of the deficiencies we have when interviewing victims, disbelieving victims, especially when trauma is involved. And then the last 2, before we wrap up this morning, a lot of you know that one of my passions is in the world of wrongful convictions and false confessions. So I had to mention a couple of these books. This one here, True Story of False Confessions, edited by Rob Warden and a friend of WZ's and a friend of mine, Steve Dreesen, over at Northwestern. A really neat book that highlights several different cases. Each chapter is a different case where a different false confession came in. One of our instructors is on. Mr. John Guzman recommends How to Break a Terrorist as well by Matthew Alexander. Thanks, Dr. G, for that shout out. And the last one I'll mention, written by another friend at WZ and a friend of mine, James Trainham, who's a retired homicide detective from Washington, D.C., How the Police Generate False Confessions. This might seem offensive when you read the title, but what's really neat about this is it goes from Trainham's own perspective of being a detective and his experience of conducting interviews and how he actually obtained a false confession without knowing it, and now he had to go back and investigate his own case. So really neat perspective. Tony chimed in. The Netflix series Unbelievable, or the report has been retitled Unjustifiable Mean. So hopefully those are some good books to pick up. If you're able to support a local bookstore, I would do that. And so you can get some more knowledge as we're all sitting at home. Hope you've had a great week. Enjoy your coffee, and make sure to check in to see Mr. Wayne Hoover tomorrow morning. Cheers.